The year 1939 began with an uneasy peace, the air thick with tension and the rumble of distant drums. The world was on edge, aware that the fragile peace established after the Great War was hanging by a thread. The Treaty of Versailles, intended to ensure lasting peace, had instead sown seeds of resentment and unrest, particularly in Germany. Europe had watched with bated breath as Hitler's Germany, emboldened and hungry for expansion, had steadily chipped away at the fragile post-World War I order. The rise of the Nazi regime had been marked by a series of bold and aggressive moves, each one testing the resolve of the Western powers. Hitler's rhetoric was filled with promises of restoring Germany to its former glory, and his actions were a testament to his relentless ambition. The annexation of Austria, the dismemberment of Czechoslovakia, each act of aggression was met with a mixture of appeasement and anxiety from the Western powers. The Munich Agreement of 1938, which allowed Germany to annex the Sudetenland, was seen by many as a desperate attempt to avoid another catastrophic war. Yet, it only emboldened Hitler further, convincing him that the Allies lacked the will to stop his expansionist agenda. But Hitler's ambition knew no bounds. His vision of a greater Germany, a Reich that would dominate Europe and beyond, drove him to take increasingly audacious risks. The Nazi propaganda machine worked tirelessly to justify these actions, portraying them as necessary steps to reclaim what was rightfully Germany's. The German military, revitalized and rearmed, stood ready to execute Hitler's plans with ruthless efficiency. On September 1, 1939, the world held its breath as German forces, with terrifying speed and might, unleashed a devastating attack on Poland, shattering the uneasy peace and igniting the deadliest conflict in human history. The Blitzkrieg, or lightning war strategy employed by the Germans, was a brutal and effective combination of air raids, artillery bombardments, and rapid ground assaults. Within weeks, Poland was overwhelmed, and the Western powers, realizing the futility of further appeasement, declared war on Germany. The invasion of Poland marked the beginning of World War II, a conflict that would engulf the globe and reshape the course of history. The stakes were now higher than ever, and the world braced itself for the long and arduous struggle ahead. Great Britain and France, bound by treaty to defend Poland's sovereignty, declared war on Germany on September 3, 1939. Yet, despite their declarations, the initial months of the war were marked by a strange and unsettling lull on the Western Front. This period, known as the Phony War or Sitzkrieg, was characterized by a tense stalemate, with both sides entrenched along the Franco-German border, seemingly reluctant to engage in full-scale combat. The relative quiet of the Western Front stood in stark contrast to the whirlwind campaign in Poland. Hitler's generals, employing the innovative tactics of Blitzkrieg or lightning war, unleashed a devastating combination of air power, tanks, and mobile infantry. The Polish army, though courageous, was ill-equipped to counter the speed and ferocity of the German onslaught. As the Polish defenses crumbled under the weight of the German attack, the world watched in horror. The German Blitzkrieg, a swift and brutal military tactic, overwhelmed the Polish forces, leaving them with little chance to regroup or mount a significant counter-offensive. The skies were filled with the roar of German aircraft, and the ground shook under the relentless advance of their tanks and infantry. But as if the situation wasn't dire enough, another threat emerged from the east. The Soviet Union, under the leadership of Joseph Stalin, saw an opportunity to expand its influence and territory. On September 17, 1939, a date that would live in infamy for the Polish people, Soviet forces invaded Poland from the east, catching the already beleaguered nation in a pincer movement. The Polish military, already stretched thin and demoralized by the German onslaught, found itself fighting a war on two fronts. This invasion sealed the fate of the beleaguered nation. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a secret non-aggression agreement signed between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union just weeks before the war, had laid the groundwork for this devastating collaboration. The pact, named after the foreign ministers of the two nations, was more than just a promise of non-aggression. It was a blueprint for the division of Eastern Europe. It had secretly divided Eastern Europe into spheres of influence, with Poland being the most significant victim of this clandestine agreement. The country was to be split between the two powers, effectively erasing it from the map. With Poland caught in the crosshairs, its people faced unimaginable suffering. Families were torn apart, cities were destroyed, and the very fabric of Polish society was ripped to shreds. In the months that followed, the Soviet Union did not stop at Poland. The Soviet Union would also occupy the Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, bringing them under its control through a combination of military force and political pressure. This further expanded its control over the region, solidifying its presence and influence in Eastern Europe. The occupation of these states marked the beginning of a long and oppressive period of Soviet dominance, which would last for decades and leave a lasting impact on the region's history and identity. Section 5. The Winter War, Finland's stand against Soviet aggression. This conflict, which lasted from November 1939 to March 1940, was a significant chapter in the history of World War II. The Soviet Union's aggression did not go unchallenged. In November 1939, the Soviet Union, under the leadership of Joseph Stalin, emboldened by their conquests in Poland, sought to expand their territory further. They demanded territorial concessions from Finland, which the Finns refused. Soviet forces launched an attack on Finland, initiating a brutal conflict. The Soviets aimed to secure strategic territory and solidify their northwestern border, believing it would be a swift victory. Aiming to secure strategic territory and solidify their northwestern border. The Finns, however, were determined to defend their homeland. Though vastly outnumbered and outgunned, the Finnish forces were not easily intimidated. They were fighting for their survival and their nation's sovereignty. Put up a fierce resistance in a conflict that would become known as the Winter War. The harsh winter conditions played a significant role in the conflict. Fighting in brutally cold and snowy conditions, Finnish soldiers who were well adapted to the freezing temperatures and rugged terrain, utilizing their knowledge of the terrain and innovative tactics, such as guerrilla warfare and the use of ski troops, managed to outmaneuver the larger Soviet forces, inflicted heavy casualties on the invading Soviet forces. Despite their smaller numbers, the Finns' resilience and strategic ingenuity allowed them to hold their ground against a seemingly unstoppable force. The Finnish soldiers set up ambushes in the dense forests, using the natural landscape to their advantage. Their white camouflage uniforms blended seamlessly with the snowy environment, making them nearly invisible to the enemy. The Soviet tanks and heavy machinery often got stuck in the deep snow, rendering them ineffective. The Finns took advantage of these moments, launching surprise attacks that left the Soviet forces reeling. Finnish snipers, highly skilled and patient, picked off Soviet troops from concealed positions. Their precision and deadly accuracy further demoralized the invading forces. The entire Finnish population was mobilized for the war effort. Civilians supported the soldiers by providing supplies, building fortifications, and maintaining morale. The sense of unity and determination was palpable. Despite the overwhelming odds, the Finns celebrated several key victories. Each success boosted their morale and proved that they could stand up to the Soviet giant. The Winter War eventually ended with the signing of the Moscow Peace Treaty in March 1940. While Finland had to cede some territory, they retained their independence and demonstrated their unyielding spirit. The Finnish soldiers returned home as heroes, having defended their nation against a much larger adversary. Their bravery and tenacity during the Winter War remain a proud chapter in Finland's history. Today, memorials and monuments across Finland honor the sacrifices made during the Winter War. The conflict serves as a reminder of the resilience and courage of the Finnish people in the face of overwhelming odds. Finland's stand against Soviet aggression is a testament to the power of determination and the will to defend one's homeland no matter the cost. Section 6. Naval Warfare, the U-boat threat and the Battle of the River Plate. While the land battles raged in Europe, the war at sea began in earnest. German U-boats, operating in packs and employing wolfpack tactics, posed a deadly threat to Allied shipping lanes in the Atlantic. The sinking of the British passenger liner Athenia on the very day war was declared, with the loss of almost 100 lives, shocked the world and highlighted the indiscriminate nature of submarine warfare. In the year 1939, the world witnessed the devastating debut of Germany's Blitzkrieg tactics. This revolutionary military doctrine combined the power of tanks, aircraft, and motorized infantry in a swift and coordinated assault. The German Wehrmacht, equipped with the formidable Panzer III and I Voy tanks, along with the aerial superiority provided by the Luftwaffe's Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters and Junkers Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers, overwhelmed its opponents with lightning speed and firepower. With the outbreak of war, a long shadow was cast over the civilian populations of Europe. Governments on all sides mobilized their economies for war production, with factories switching to the manufacture of armaments and other essential supplies. Propaganda ministries churned out posters, films, and radio broadcasts designed to bolster morale and demonize the enemy. Rationing was introduced, and air raid shelters became a familiar sight in cities and towns across Europe. The world watched in horror as the events of 1939 unfolded. The policy of appeasement pursued by Britain and France in the hope of averting war lay in ruins. The brutal realities of Nazi aggression, epitomized by the invasion of Poland and the atrocities committed against Polish civilians, shocked and outraged global opinion. As 1939 drew to a close, the world stood on the brink of a global conflict. The invasion of Poland, the partition of Eastern Europe, and the outbreak of fighting at sea had shattered any illusions of peace. The year 1939 had been a prelude to the deadliest and most destructive war in human history, a conflict that would engulf the globe and leave an indelible mark on the 20th century.